Okay, here in video 9, I want to touch ground a little bit with the stargates and got other information that will unravel itself as I begin to talk, because this is when we tap into the higher order energy systems and we begin to, and I here do it in plural because we have several. If you are acquainted with the work on the different timelines and code streams, you will discover that you technically have a version of yourself with different energy system there, which you need to decompose and work with in the correct manner to get whatever's left of viable genetics and to unravel and transmute whatever is left so that you cease to exist on that timeline. But when we talk about the getting out of here, we talked about the restoration program, the transition science course material, but here I want to talk about the stargates, and it's the concepts of stargates are wrong because when we talk about the D9 stargate, is it a stargate to at the Andromedan constellation, because stars are constellations in the sky, right? No, it's actually to a galaxy, so it's not a stargate, it's a galaxy gate, so therefore it's a main gate. And then you have the density 2 gates, which I think is more accurate. So you can say the last of the density 2 gates are the D9, which is what we call on the inner domains, but it is the dimension 9. So here you begin to understand, okay, when we talk about the densities and we talk about the domains and how they're built up, even though it's inaccurate to say dimension 1, 2, and 3 are part of the outer domain, even though it's been made so for our convenience, I just told you there are 9 dimensions in the outer domain. So technically we have the miniature configuration of the gate system in the outer domains. And the way to get out of the outer domain via the gate system is the D9 gate, which is both centered in the outer domain as a D9 configuration. It is a pattern that you need to integrate in your energy system. But it's also locality. It's positioned on a specific place on our planet. The Kalontic scientists have talked about this, but I'm going to do my version of it. And then there is the outer gate systems, which you know I've been talking about in the Source of Humanity. I talked about the different gate systems that are connected to genetics. So we are having what we call gates that are able of opening and closing for crafts between different universal structures. And we are having the minor gates that you can travel via if you have the energetic and genetic affinity. So if you reconfigure your energy system, you are capable of walking through these gates, as you are not in this organic vessel, never in this organic vessel. But we do have similar kind of features in the outer domain, actually in the different dimensional settings, which you will understand if you're just when you become really energetically sensitive. If I'm out walking in nature, there are these different gates in nature right there in front of me. As a kind of, if I choose to go that way or the other way, I will get into a different dimension of the outer domain reality that is either positioned in the 4th, 5th, like the 6, 7, 8, or 9. So, or in the lower levels, which are connected to the underworld. So instead of saying dimensions, we can say representations of the different cycles that have been possible to unfold on or in the outer domain. So dimension 1, 2, and 3 are technically cycle 1, 2, and 3. Dimension 4, 5, and 6 are cycle 4, 5, and 6. Dimension 7, 8, and 9 are the cycles that should have been completed in the inner domains, which is they are here as a potentiality, sorry about that, as a potentiality to build into a minefield. But they are not actual places unless you go out in nature and you vibrate your energy system up to these dimensional or cyclic versions of energy and vibration inside this reality. Then you can connect with them, you can perceive them, and you can recreate a holographic structure of yourself out of your energy system and enter these higher level density 3 operational fields inside this system, where you can then build density 3 patterns. Now that is enormously complex. So let me try to give that one for you again. in a more example that you kind of can work with. Let's do the fourth dimension. We have the D4 Stargate under the Giza complex, right? It has been taken over by the Orions, and I've done what I could to clear that one. And I'm working my way through the different layers of the historical settings of Cycle 4 under the Giza complex, which of course we know is a remaining technology of Atlantis. It was reallocated there after the fall of Atlantis to be able to reseed the fourth cycle races in that continent that we know of, Africa, as well as reseeding it in Mesopotamia, as well as reseeding it on the other levels of our planet. So portions of the fourth cycle technology of Lemuria, as well as the fourth cycle technology of Atlantis, the beginning of Atlantis before they shifted into the fifth, have been remodified and transformed and transferred, allocated into the new land masses that rose after the old continent of Atlantis, and the other colonies that were connected to Atlantis were put down under the oceanic level. So you here need to understand there are no places on this planet that are linked to Atlantis. There are no landmass on this planet that are linked to Atlantis. But there are technologies and networks and human genetics, which means we can, via the genetics and via the technologies and via the holographic network that were transferred from Atlantis, to be able to reseed the current human civilization. So it's in the networks, it's not in the land masses. So it doesn't matter if you go to Africa, you will only get to the fourth cycle reseeded races, but you can connect to the technology. And that's why you need to have the correct configuration of Lemuria to be able to connect to the Lemurian technology. And that's one of the reasons why the 70s wanted me to Australia, because there were technology there from Lemuria as well, planted into the racial grid work as well as the racial network that enabled the Aboriginals to be reseeded there. And some of the prior races, you know, the Aboriginals have the story of the humans that came from the sky, and they created the current man and woman breeder-worker races, which the indigenous people technically are. That's why they have never gotten to any higher state of civilization. Sorry, guys and girls of the indigenous people. You're kind people, nothing to do with who and what you are, but this is what you've been engineered to, and it's nothing to do with you or your choices or anything of your doing. There are limitations to how far you can go, just to put it out there so that people don't think I am a racist in any ways or forms. But it's the same with indigenous people all over the planet. Most of them were men and women. They were engineered as breeders workers. And only the bloodlines were the males and females that had the alien genome in them, so they became the elite and the leading factions, leading the workers and the breeders. That's the class differentiation that happened in the reseeding. So therefore, we have different potentiality of how far we can push it. But to be able to reseed these genomic structures that both goes back to the Neanderthals and the continent of Mu, as well as Lemuria, enabling it to be a low caste and a high caste on the different continents, different types of technologies were transferred from the old continents and into the new ones and became part of the holographic network where they exist as realities. The most prominent one you know is Shambhala, right? That's one of the crystal cities of Atlantis that were transferred there in the fifth dimension as a holographic potentiality. It is in the density 2 area of our planet, and therefore it is the fifth dimension, and you can only access it in an energy system that has the fifth dimensional configuration. There are gates there. If you try to get there, if you're not having the correct configuration, you won't get past the gates. So you have to put your hand on the gate, and then the version of you have created in holographic modality in the fifth dimension, you put that one on the gate, and then it will open up if you have the correct energetic configuration. Because that's when things went south in Atlantis, there was this, as we're experiencing now, the ones that fell and the ones that tried to keep their original configuration. They gathered together in these crystal cities where they were able to keep the energy so high that everything around them would vibrate off, so to speak, or radiate off. And they had that energy configuration, which many that have been doing the spiritual teaching system have been trying to recreate, as in, I create a white bubble of light around me, and then I can bounce off all of this negativity. But the problem is, as if you are this cone of light in a world of darkness and disaster and horror shows, eventually you will succumb to it. And that's why the intervention and clearing out, and then what was reseeded were the ones that were and from these crystal cities. One of the Shambhala is therefore an Atlantean crystal city that were positioned as the main center of the planetary hierarchy. That were the group of different alien factions that teamed together, including the Lunars, and took part and control of the reseeding and became the leading governmental organ for the reseeding of the indigenous people, as that had the Neanderthal genome, the workers, the breeders, as well as the field males and females having the alien galactic DNA configuration lodged into their mitochondria, transferred into the offspring via the maternal lineage, whereas the workers and breeders are transferring both the female but also from the male, actually. So there you have a different configuration, and there you begin to understand why it has been so important to protect the females. And I'm not saying the women, because the women are the whores, right? You can do them with whatever you want to do with them, which we've seen over the course of history. But the females of the higher class were to be protected. They were to be protected by their males, and the male lineages, which you are seeing played out in some of the older cultural settings that are still going on our planet. Now, of course, been turned into something enormously suppressing, since many of these older lineages have fallen apart and become confused and confused by dark ones. But you're also having the worker breeder races that have taken these customs to them, and they're the negative Y chromosome in the Neanderthal infused worker males have then, or men, have then spawned that system where they are protecting their breeder females, and if they try to do anything, they kill them, because then they are no longer carrying their offspring, but something else. And we're seeing that in the animal kingdom as well. That's where the animal genome kicks through, because we're seeing that in, for instance, if you do Robert Sapolsky, he talks about how the baboons and some of the higher or more aggressive ape types, they are literally, if they want to impregnate, if they want to mate with the female, even though she has offlings, the male will kill the female. Let's just use that expression there, because it won't, the woman monkey, right? It doesn't sound right. So we're just saying we'll kill the offspring of the female so that he can procreate and take her over and make her part of his harem. So that's the animal negative, contaminated second cycle features that bleed through from the continent of Mu, because it really turned nasty in Mu. That's bad. But we're still having, as I said, the hyper programs during the times of Atlantis. So that also goes in hand in hand when we're talking about becoming part of the galactic communities. What galactic communities? Because it depends on our DNA. Do we have from the lineages? We know when you read the Bailey materials, you talked about how that group that called themselves the Flame Lords from Venus, whether or not that's true, I would say she uses that expression instead of CRNA. But in my interpretation, in the Nibiruan CRNA races, that's the Great White Brotherhood and the Flame Lords, they imbued some of their DNA into the worker breeder races, and then turned them into lineages where they became the ones that were controlling reality inside this one. And then they made different governmental institutions, as we know as the planetary hierarchy. And many other galactic races did so in the reseeding. So there is a, well, Randy, does that then mean when they say we are their offspring and by that we are part of their projects? No, because it was not ever intended to be an enslavement. So when races come and tell you that you're part of their experiment and by that they're entitled to do whatever they need to do with you, then that is the incoming races that have inherited these original lineageal contracts, because the galactic factions have pulled out. So that's the problem we're dealing with here when people are being used in artificial breeding programs to create the hybrid programs. They are aliens that have inherited the original galactic contracts within the lineages that were supposed to be the elite, which has now been pushed into the military projects instead, because these lineages were beginning to fall apart. So either they could maintain themselves by horrific rituals, or they could and embed themselves with the pockets of the lost civilizations, or they could align themselves with the incoming races and by that get the genetic infusion they needed to become the new version of the enhanced humans, which we then know they were tricked, and they got some shitty piece of DNA, which then led them to an even lesser potential state than they were to begin with. Hence the failure of the military projects. But the aliens got what they needed. They got the gene codes that they needed, so therefore they were the winners of that trade, and not the lineages that were part of the military projects, the military elite that goes with the Hyksos lineages and some of the the pharaohs, the nobilities, the kingly lineages, the royal lineages that were part of the elite. So they are the parts that have been part of the military projects. So it's a complex story here where we are understanding that no matter who and whatever they are, that's why it's really no point in pointing fingers anymore, because the lineages, their DNA is breaking down. The worker-breeder humans, the worker-breeder men and women groupings, the Neanderthal offspring are breaking down. The female, male, even though they're not lineages, but they're hidden inside the society that used to have it but don't know their lineages, their DNA is breaking down. The original true humans and their energy systems are breaking down because we've been ground harvested so many times that we have been completely polluted and destroyed by the groupings that have come in here, including the alien races from the 50s and onward, because what the lineages did that teamed up with the incoming groupings of under the military projects, they sold out what they knew of the original technologies and what they knew of the original energy systems that had belonged to the elders, or that had belonged to what we call the solar lineages, humanoid lineages, or the original true human lineages, which of course were targeted and taken out by the Dracos, but that were in the control of the brotherhoods, aka what was left of the Hyksos lineages in the Egyptian strands, to put it that way. So again, betrayal all the way through and through. But that's not where I wanted to go. It's just a kind of a background, so you understand that it's not about who is good and who is not good, which we would say we keep reinterpreting the saying of that's in the Gospels of, why do you see the splinter in your eye of your fellow human when you're not seeing a huge beam or lodge of tree in your own? And that's because none of us are pure. It's all going to shit, to put it in a short version, and we need to deal with that, and that's part of our clearing and purification work. So with that one in context, we also understand when we try to recreate a reconnection to these advanced technologies, the different alien groups that are here have not managed to do so. We also understand that the alien technologies are part of the original galactic communities that were part of the reseeding. We also understand that most of these races are gone. The last one pulls out in a physical form in the 90s, and there was a little bit fewer what we call the original galactic investors in the 2000s, but during the stellar activation cycle they pulled out as well, and then it was left into the hands of the military projects, which we know collapsed in 2018. Then we had the transhuman, the parallel universal matrix races going together, creating the event program and the matrix of change and the circumstances we are under now. So when we try to recreate our pattern of change within our energy system so we can reconnect to the transferred technologies and code streams and racial grids from the highest level of Atlantis that didn't fall but were reseeded, including from the levels of the fourth cycle that were transferred to become the foundation of Egypt, as well, that's the D4 stargate, as well as some of the older levels were connected through the gate systems in Mesopotamia, but that, as we know, have been completely taken over by the dark forces, so we won't focus on that one, and that's where the Baals came from. And it already began to fall when what was left of the Baal races transferred or migrated to Wales and England, where they recreated their empire and creating the D5 stargate, or the D11, as many are saying it is. It is technically going from D5 to D11. But it's incorrect to call it a fifth dimensional stargate. But Stonehenge were to carry that configuration, and it is a configuration in the older network that is beneath the original position of Stonehenge, and not the one in Eastern England. The white horse that you're seeing in Salisbury is also, it has the physical representation of it, but it also has an energy configuration. And to create the pattern where you can use the physical representation, you need to have the energetic pattern. So you need to know how to connect to the fifth dimensional patterns behind these configurations in Southern England to be able to connect to the physical representations of them. And that's why Stonehenge has fallen apart, because as civilizations grew out of the knowledge of the Celts, and the Celts got more and more infected by their collaboration with the Dracos, that knowledge of how to turn the time tables, as it's called, back to the time where you would use these different configurations of holographic features by touching it with your hand and connecting it to your mind field, were lost. Then the access to these patterns that are beneath the different stargates were lost as well. So how does that work? We have the one in Egypt that were taken over by the Orion, so we won't focus as much on that one unless you're able to go to the original fifth dimensional level of Egypt that were connected to the original configuration of the last times of Lemuria, as well as the beginning times of Atlantis. I'm not figuring out that many of you will do that. So the most natural one will be Southern England, which is also why there's been a lot of crap cycles, corn cycles, that has, you could call them crap cycles, because some of them are actually from the Greys that have been using, because that's, you could say the Baals, when they went to England and became the Celts, they were viciously protecting that knowledge. So therefore, even though they moved the stones from Wales to Southern England, they made other of these symbols, as the white horse and other, the what we call the corn circles, which is inaccurate. That's why I choked up on it. But let us just call it that, because typically where there's corn, so they made sure these fields were not to be inhabited. They were to be kept pure by only producing what we call corn and wheat and whatever on these different premises, or they made it into some kind of sacred area so that people would not build buildings upon it, even though the Romans tried to and the church tried to use the energy there. But we know the church is part of the Baal, so they, of course, they targeted these ancient sites, which we know from the whole Avalon material, where we understand that the original people of that were seated in England had the connection to Atlantis, and that's why that was brought there. So that's kind of where we're going to say, well, that's the round table of Avalon and all of these kind of things. I'm not going to go down that path, because the Pendragon lineage and all of these things, they're nobilities, and Pendragon, dragon, so that's the sons and the children of the dragon, so that's the Draco lineage. So I'm not going to go down there and say, oh yeah, that's the ones that we need to rely on, not at all. So Arthur is not our guy. He was a Nordic imbued with Draco genetics. Okay, so going into, even though I get into, sorry about that, his mother was of the dragon lineage, so technically she was of not the contaminated Tiamat genome, but one of the purer lineages of that one from Vega. Anyway, sorry about that one, it just came in. Okay, so when we're talking about, so what can we do? Are we to go into the corn circles and sit in that and get the frequency vibration, which many have done, and they have actually got a Kundalini activation from it? But that's just the physical molecular state that activates a higher level of the frequency spectrum, but it's not the density 2 configuration. So what are these corn circles made for? They are made for both, they are recalibrating via the pattern the network beneath in southern England. There are corn circles on many places on the planet. It is just not sought for in the same manner. The reason why it's put there is because of the Stargate that they thought were beneath Stonehenge, but never was. But there were other things as part of southern England that tied to what we call, let's just call it the ley lines that went to the original configuration in Wales. But that knowledge was lost when the Baals, because there were Baal races that moved the original Stonehenge Stargate from Wales to southern England, because the Welsh people belongs to they are the original, some of the original Celts along with the Scottish people. So now you get the origin of some of the issues that are going on there. The Irish people go to a Celtic lineage that goes back to Atlantis actually. The Scots go to a different, the Picts, I can't remember what they're called, but that's a different lineage that goes with the solar rishis. And the Welsh people, they go with a lineage I have no name for whatsoever, because they are so far back in time that they have no name in our common language. And that's why the Stargate were transferred there after the fall of Atlantis. So you could say, is England part of Atlantis? No, but it has technology that stemmed from Atlantis. And some of the grids of these ancient people in the Welsh nature, which is why it's hostile and nobody really wants to live there for the same reason, kept that genome intact, that were tied into the original configuration of the original technology that fueled the Stargate of Stonehenge. So we got the rocks in southern England trying to revive it via the corn circles, as well as using it as a focal point to infuse energy. All corn circles are used as focal points to infuse energies on a subtle level to maintain the networks that are tied in. So England, that point, that position is a nodal point on our planet, not a chakra, but a nodal point. There are other nodal points, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and we have Antarctica, and we have the Arctic, and we have actually, there were one in America, but it's no longer there. Let me just put it that way. And the Colontics talked about all this in Florida and whatever. That's all alien. That's the 1950s, the military projects. They have recalibrated some of their versions there. Bermuda Triangle, Dragon's Eye in Japan. These are some of the original nodal points that had what we call Lemurian Atlantean technology connected to it. So they are beneath, that's sunk into the ocean. So therefore it's not working correctly because it's no longer tied to humans. So when we talk about the corn circles in southern England and the Baals, some of it are of negative origin, others are part of the reconfiguration of the lineages that are a part of the Celtic groups that used to exist in England. But the Baals are kind of taking that more or less over in 2017. They've got more and more grace, and the military projects ruined quite a lot of that. So there was a lot of the new corn circles that got there later on, after the Old World Order fell, were part of the military projects and the grace and the Baals and what they were trying to do and activate a new version of the Stargate they had in Mesopotamia, trying to recalibrate that and activate that in England. So England is no longer the country of the Celts. It has now become the country of the Baals. So that's also important to understand. And that's due to the military projects that were going on there. So that's a loss. And that's why I'm not looking back at England and saying, oh yeah, I want to go back to England. And no point of going there. So we understand that technology can be transferred because it's holographic, but we also understand that there's a physical representation of it in the outer domain, there used to be, and then there is an energetic representation as we are having energy systems and physical forms. So all of this alien technology is now in the other dimensions of our reality, and only the ones that have the configuration and the consciousness units to know where they are will be able to activate these patterns. And that's some of the things that's been, since I go back to Lemuria, I have access to some of these configurations, and that's, as I said, some of the things that have been attempted to do with me when I went to Australia, but then that was taken over by the negative lineages and that whole story, as you know, that didn't go so well. I have been trying, though, later on to clear out these energetic configurations because they need to be removed from our planet since they're part of the original construction. So that's part of when we remove these original technologies and shut them down because there are no longer any humans to operate them, then they can be removed, calibrated up to the 6th dimension and pulled out as part of the pull out of the original construction. So that's also happening. And as that happens, then our planet will fall deeper and deeper. So when we, again, referring back to, as I said in the update, when we understand that the alien races that are here, why they are putting their crafts into the ocean or very close to our reality, it's because they scout for these ancient technologies. Because these ancient technologies hold the configuration of different lineages, and they hold the configuration of the genomes that are connected to these lineages. It has connection to the library where you would get the code sequence that would enable them to reconfigure their hybrid projects to be able to operate these technologies. If they could then get it to the outer domain position, which is not necessary because that is overridden by the event program, they would then be able to make their hybrids, if they had the configuration of the original technologies in their energy system, to recreate the original technologies by using the incoming alien technology, and by that create hybrid technology that they would be able to operate inside this system, and with that reconfigure this reality into what they needed to be. And that's part of some of the things the parallel universal matrix is doing here, because they need that technology to continue their own reality. So we are in a hunt down for the ancient technologies, which I've been part of for a very long time, and that's why I always said, well, I know I can, but I'm not sure I'm supposed to. And that's also why when we talk about some of the original lineages that were here but were forgotten that they were lineages, have been part of the groups that have been doing the quote-unquote spiritual work, that have been doing the grid work, that have been trying to open portals and what have you for these different take over galactic forces to come in and get access to the configuration of the racial grids and the configuration of the networks that would grant them access to the technology. You see, none of the races that are here really interested in our DNA, but they're interested in the original configuration of our energy system. They need our DNA to do so. And then, of course, you have the transhuman greys that are trying to create organic forms of the workers and the breeders. But that's a whole other... That's why they're treating the workers and breeders as animals, because they technically are. I'm sorry, guys and girls, but you're engineered that way. That's very against all rules of civilization, so it's not okay. It is in no way okay. But that's what the Dracos did, and that's what they engineered. Again, when you are having civilizations that have been doing stuff in the reality field, it never dissipates, it never disappears as long as there's viability. So therefore it has to be transformed or transmuted, which means that it can be transformed to its highest purity rate, and then you can transmute the holographic configuration and return it to the original pool of cleansed energies, or pull out, extract the genetics back to the original pure nodal points that are in all reality networks in the 6th dimension. That's the library. Not the source, the library, where they then will be reconfigured and put into play in a new seeding at some point, under the control of the core domain civilizations. So that's kind of how it goes. And I know there are many saying, well, I'm returning to source and then I'll sit there and play. But there are these source cycles, as I talk about. That's the infinity level. That's very, very high up. And you can access that if you go into an extreme purity rate inside this system. But it's not something I would vouch for or say, yeah, you can do that and go back to source, because I'm not interested in going back to the infinity plane. Why should I? That's the reseeding of the cycles that goes with the universal cycles. I'll get there in time. When I'm done in all of the other levels of the domains and reality fields, I'll be pulled back into the D14 collective, where I'll be joined with all of the others that spawned from the D14 infinity cycles of the D14 collective, and then be pulled into the next universal structure and be reseated there. And that goes for infinity. I have no, I need to go home longing. That's just a human interpretation of, I want to be part of love and all of these kind of things that goes there, because their emotionality, their human emotional field respond to the higher light coding as if it is love. But it's just light coding. The moment you get all the human, emotional, electrochemical processes out of your body, you will connect to light. You'll connect to the codings, you'll understand everything, but you won't have that emotionality over it, which technically contaminates it. Because light is not love in that expression that we're interpreting it as. That's electrochemical process in the molecules. But it has a soothing effect on the physical form, and to some degree under the old world order, that will allow to be part of the spiritual upgrading, but only to a certain extent. Then the mind field had to kick in, as we were taught in the planetary hierarchy teachings given to us both by the Colontics in their version of it, which were against the planetary hierarchy, as well as the Great White Brotherhood of the lunar, Niburian, Syrian A races. These were competing with each other, the crystalline Syrian B and their Vega fellowship, to put it that way, as well as the other ones and their brotherhood fellowship. So there has been this competing between the galactic races of who actually had most access to the original technologies that were reseeded after the fall of Atlantis, because the crystalline bees were also part of that group that participated in the reseeding, but they were mainly part of, I don't really know which section. There are different sections on our planet. I don't really know. It's a version of them that doesn't exist anymore. The crystalline bees I'm referring to here, the ones that work with South America, sorry about that. And that, sorry, I can't get more information. That's the door that's closed for me. So sorry about that one. Sorry for bringing it up. It's a closed door. That's not what I'm to focus on here, because we are now in that timetable of completing the fourth cycle, and that means what's left of that one, and that is due to the since the crystalline bees were only interested in the fifth dimension, it has connection to the military projects. It has a connection to some of the negative races that have been here, and that's why I'm kind of saying, yeah, should we really trust them and the information they've been given? Sorry about that. I'm being trapped, entangled there. I'm cutting myself loose from that one. So you see here again, sometimes when we expand our mind field into something we shouldn't get into, we get entangled. And there, as a path cutter, you cut that loose, disassemble it, disintegrate it, and say, yeah, I used to work with that. And that was part of when I was dealing with the D13 collective, then I worked with that one. But when we're working with, even though we're not saying, well, the Niburian are good guys and the Syrian A's are not particularly good guys either, but that group originally sprung from the D14, even though they aligned themselves more with the D13 collective and therefore were seen to be what we call traitors, right? So they shifted side to get more control in this reality field, because as long as you're connected to the D14 collective, the progressive worlds, you operate under the councils. You have to say yes to whatever they put on you, because it's been decided by the joint group of races that this is what needs to be done, and you become the extension of the council or a tool of the council in the realities you're part of, because that's part of your function under the progressive laws, that you adhere to what the councils ask you to do, whether or not you want to do it. There's an enormous amount of laws, there's an enormous amount of rules and principles, as you know, and we adhere to what is being asked of us to do by the councils. And the D13 collective did not join that idea, and that's why many decided eventually they got tired of the councils, because the councils eventually just said, yeah, we'll pull out eventually. If you don't fix this, we'll segregate, and then you'll be left with nothing. And once they met the tipping point, they had to work very hard to get back, and some of them just kind of, yeah, fuck it, I'll do the D13 and I get technology, and then it'll go quicker. And before they knew of it, they were entangled into the D13 technological lineages and strands and code streams, and then it became intrinsically more difficult to get out, which you understand when you begin to clear out the technology that's attached to your energy system, because that fucking technology keeps reproducing itself. As long as we are alive, it reproduces itself. It uses our life force to do so, unfortunately. Okay, so there are absolutely 10 times more to say to this, but I hope you kind of get the idea of how we change our energy system. We change our energy system via symbols and patterns, either by races putting it onto us and then they get access to us and they can recalibrate us so we get onto their code streams. Or we do it by our own making, by positioning ourselves on some of these old nodal points that hold the prints of the original Lemurian or Atlantean technology. But you have to have the correct gene code to be able to do so. Or we do it visually, holographically on our timeline travels on the code streams where we use our older types of activated DNA, clear it out to its highest purity rate, its high standards, and then via that create a holographic energy system that can access the holographic imprints in the planetary reality field of these ancient technologies, crystal cities, gold cities, secret cities, whatever's there, they were part of the original civilizations that had the highest standards. So we have to have the highest standards to be able to work with the technologies there. Once we enter into these holographic cities, we will recalibrate our energy system to hold the same holographic configuration. But rest assured, the moment you do that, you will be targeted and they will do whatever they can to harvest you. And I've been experiencing that over and over and over again. I get access, I get the configuration, and bam, I am ground harvested and I'm back to scratch the day after. So that's the challenge of working that way. But I'm not going to stop it because I am, from having cleared as much as I can of the racial grids and the old civilizations and the DNA storage units that were part of the library, the next step is, of course, the technology. So I'm doing that as well. And in that, learning to work more efficiently. And as I've done the reconfiguration, what do I need to do with it? How do I need to work with it? And then lift it up to the sixth dimension where they won't get access to it. Prior, I was not good at lifting it up to the sixth dimension because it hadn't activated yet. The original configuration I used to have had been taken from me. It was taken from me in Australia. Okay, so that's kind of some of the understandings of patterns of change. It's not just about seeing the patterns around you in the outer domain or reality program, which of course tells you something else is coming your way, but it's also to understand that you need to reconfigure your energy system to shift timelines, and that's done via patterns. And these patterns are redefining your code streams as well. And it's part of our work to keep ourselves intact, to maintain ourselves on a higher level. We need to reconnect to the original code streams. We need to reconnect to the original technologies of the civilizations that succeeded. So we have that configuration from where we can access more holographic levels of the original density 1 network that is connected to the original construction, so that we get the original configuration from where we will be drawn out when we shed off this physical form. Eventually, if we really do it well, for instance, if I chose to go to England, not now, but if I chose to do that and went to southern England, I would be able to take all of the whatever's left of the original configurations and some of the circle configurations that's not visible, some of the different animals that have been carved into the Salisbury horse, and we've seen in the Mayan, the Nazca lines as well. Go to these, not that I want to go to the Mayan stuff because I don't want to do that. That's Tothian, don't want to go there. But fallen avian, so no thank you. But the idea is that if I were to go to these sacred sites and knew how to find them, I would actually be able to recalibrate my physical DNA by having the outer expression of it inside this reality. Let me repeat this. You get the original density 2 configuration into your energy system. You move yourself to the locality where these sacred sites are hidden, not obviously where there's a lot of stone put together that's sometimes misleading, or the attempt to recreate it there because these granite stones can hold energy. But you activate the original symbols if you know where to go, and then you get reconnected to the original density 2, which will then recalibrate your energy system, which will then recalibrate your bio-DNA. inside this reality with your physical form. And then you will see yourself in a holographic representation of that technology, of that laboratory, of that whatever it was, as you're standing there and absorbing the energies of it into your bio vessel. I did that in Australia. Trust me, that's also one of the reasons why they targeted me. Because once I began doing that, I could technically take control of the network of Australia, and then I would be able to shut down all of their different other dimensional projects. That's how powerful these technologies are. So you begin to see there's a real reason why I got targeted so severely, not just because I'm open-minded and saying a lot of weird stuff, or because I'm a releaser or whatever. Because technically, to release these different higher levels entities of the D13 collective that don't want to be part of it anymore, I need to be able to operate in all 13 dimensions. Right? And I need to have the opposition energy of it. Okay. So with that understanding, we are here brought further into, okay, when we talk about galactic communities, what galactic communities? What do we hold? What is of our original purpose and function? And what should we be observant of? What's the game that's being played around us? And why is it being played around us? Because of what? What's the reason? Do you have a very high functionality with a kind of DNA or a mission that originally were enormously important to some of the receding races, the galactic communities? Well, then they will assist you eventually if you get high enough up in vibration. If you get into the fifth dimension, you'll begin to see some of them because they are there via the infusions of the galactic core, but not for long. You need to reconnect as quickly as possible yourself. But you are also under the deception mechanisms of the Syrian technology in the artificial fifth dimension. So if you don't know the difference, you will see the dark ones present themselves in a holographic overlay as the good guys. Before you know of it, you're somewhere where you don't want to be. So that's part of the mind field and the true capacity of the mental field transformed into the mind field, from where it begins to become the perception field and connect to your original consciousness function, so that you can discern what is the right coach dream and what is not, what to work with and what not to work with, how to work with it, and how to deal with what you come in contact with. Not all of you are retrievers, because I've been transformed from, the counselors just did that the other day, from releaser to retriever, because now it's all about the technologies in the fifth dimension. That is my main priority. In the fourth cycle, it was all about releasing genetics of the human lineages of the progressive worlds and the solar rishis. Now, and the ones from the D13 that wanted to, collective that wanted to leave. Now I'm moving into the fifth. There's the retrieval of technology and upgrading and shifting it out of here so that it can be removed from this reality field and this sector of our universal structure. Thank you.